discussing the instructions which Sri Ramakrishna was giving Vijay Krishna Goswami. The conversation was going on, and suddenly a topic, a very strange topic, comes now, and it has to be understood properly because if we I mean, it can be confusing at times what this actually what implications it has. The incident goes like this: a boy named Vishnu who lived in Aryadaha has recently committed suicide by cutting his throat with a razor. Now, this topic comes first. Now, that is what M is writing. So, Sri Ramakrishna is now saying to Vijay, M, and all the other devotees there. He says, look, this boy has ended his life. When I heard about it, I felt very bad. He used to come here, he was a schoolboy. But he'd often say that he had no liking for the world. That means when he came to Sri Ramakrishna, by nature he was a very unworldly person. This is to be noted that he somehow, by the grace of God, you can say, at that stage of life, he had felt that he did not want to be a part of this world. Now, there are several instances in our scriptures also where Shukadeva himself did not want to be born. He was in, it's a strange story, but it shows that not all people are very comfortable with rebirths. And if the choice is there, a lot of people, especially spiritually inclined people, would not be born at all rather than to be born and undergo all types of struggles and reach the goal of life if they have already realized in some previous birth, or if they have done they are forced to be born, like in the case of the Ishwar Kotis. Ishwar Kotis, Sri Ramakrishna says he had to request Naren to come and be born in this world for the good of the world. He was a Jivan Mukta. So many Jivan Muktas, when incarnations come, or even otherwise, by the will of the divine, by uh, the you may say it is some kind of destiny, some kind of destiny that they are forced to be born by the will of the Lord, by the cosmic will. But here, this boy, Vishnu, has committed suicide. Whereas in Shukadeva's case, he had enough consciousness not to just decide not to be born. So they say he was born at a very it was not a normal birth. His mother had to struggle to force him to be born. He said, no, I don't need. The jiva inside him was hankering to go back to that blissful state which he had attained in his previous life. Maybe he was a jivan mukta. So jivan muktas do not normally enjoy being born again, even though it is a leela. So that's why Swami Vivekananda, though initially he was reluctant to come down, because he was in a plane where rebirth was not mandatory for him. So he was not born because of karma. So also all the Ishwar Kotis of Sri Ramakrishna. Only Mahapurush Maharaj said that all the other four Ishwar Kotis, the monastic as well as Purnachandra Ghosh, who was one of the Ishwar Kotis, that is what Sri Ramakrishna mentions. But Mahapurush Maharaj said, by his grace, not only have I got mukti, but he has made me an Ishwar Koti. That means now Swami Shivanandji, who was the second president of our order after Swami Brahmanandji, who himself was a Ishwar Koti, not only was a Ishwar Koti, but he was like a realized soul right from birth. So these people who are Jivan Mukta, they are not Jivan Muktas, they are eternally free, Nitya Mukta. That is the word which Gospel uses for this Ishwar Kotis. Ishwar Koti is a Puranic term, whereas Nitya Muktas are people who are eternally free, but they sometimes do come to this earth with the intention of supporting the Leela of the Lord. So that is what the Puranas say, and but they are Nitya Muktas all the same. So there are some cases, some exceptional cases where perhaps this kind of suicide is allowed. But let us see what Sri Ramakrishna himself says. He says, I felt very bad because he used to come here. He was just a schoolboy and with a lot of vairagya because he had no liking for this world. He had lived for a few days with some relatives in the west, that is west of Bengal, not the west as in Europe or something. In Uttar Pradesh or Punjab, I think that was the area which Sri Ramakrishna mentioned. In the west means normally to the west of West Bengal or west of United Bengal as it was during those days. So he used to meditate in a solitary field or forest or in the hills. And he used to tell me that he had strange visions of various forms of God. Now you see, this is not normal for a ordinary jiva. If a ordinary jiva commits suicide, it can be considered as a sin or a great, I mean, it's never sanctioned by the scriptures. Suicide, in fact, is not never sanctioned by the scriptures. Whatever be the trial and tribulation one has to face, our scriptures never encourage suicide. But here, Sri Ramakrishna says, because he had real strange visions of various forms of God, perhaps he thought that he was a highly evolved soul. And Sri Ramakrishna himself says, I believe it was his last birth. Maybe a little karma was remaining for which he was born. But once he realized that, perhaps he felt no use to continue his existence anymore. So he says in his previous birth, he must have accomplished a lot. Perhaps only a little was left undone, and he finished that in his life. So this is a very important thing. Many people would try to interpret this as if one is really having a disgust for the world or no liking for the world, he can as well commit suicide. No, that would be a great mistake. It is only in this exceptional case of Vishnu that where Sri Ramakrishna himself saw these samskaras, because we know Sri Ramakrishna could gauge the spiritual evolution of a devotee or disciple who came to him, and he used to judge, and his judgment was infallible. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says whatever that's why Swami Vivekananda says in once or twice when he was asked about his opinion about certain devotees, he said, I would not comment, because once Sri Ramakrishna has commented about certain people, I know it is his judgment or his intuition is infallible. I cannot add or deduct anything from that. So I just have to believe. He had so much faith because he saw with his own eyes whatever Sri Ramakrishna said about certain devotees, whatever he predicted came true. So now Sri Ramakrishna is giving an explanation why he is justifying the apparently gruesome suicide. Cutting one's throat with a knife is definitely not it's a very difficult thing to accept. But Sri Ramakrishna says one must admit the tendencies of one's past birth. There is a story about a man practicing spiritual discipline on a corpse in a deep forest. Some of the tantric sadhana you are required to you see, the tantras use some of the techniques which may look strange, but they are effective in the sense we have so many emotions. See, for example, we abhor a dead body, a dead corpse. Nobody would like to go near a corpse, even if it is of a dear relative. After a certain time, when it starts smelling, when it is in the cremation ground, nobody would like to be in the company of a corpse. So there is a inborn disgust for rotten things, or maybe things which are not living, and especially in a dark deep forest where the samskaras will uh, concoct so many imaginations. I mean, it will give rise to so many imaginations of ghosts and all those things, because we know the spirit exists even after death. So meditating on the corpse, and many times it so happens that the dead person, because of his, if he has an intense attachment for the body, the spirit refuses to live or hovers around the body. That is what our some of our Puranas, including the Garud Purana, say. So that's why they say one has to give a little time uh, for the spirit to reconcile to the fact that the body has been given up. He is so much attached, the person is so much attached to the body, that he refused, especially if the death is due to some accident, sudden death, not a natural death where he is expecting death, but if it is a sudden death, then they say the spirit takes a, it becomes very difficult for the subtle body to disassociate himself with the dead body, even if it is a corpse. So he somehow is takes time to realize that the shock, to overcome the shock which he has got because of this disassociation of the body with the subtle body, with the subtle body or the mind, and all the other components of a subtle body. So normally when there is a corpse, you associate, especially the cremation ground and many other places, especially if the body is lying in a deep forest, nobody would like to meditate, leave alone meditation. Nobody would like to even pass by that place because of the fear of ghosts or the spirits which used to uh, be part of that person, the person who has died. So there is this in tantras, a sadhana, shava sadhana, where the man has to practice discipline, his japa or whatever his instructions his guru has given him, by sitting on near or on the chest of a corpse, a dead body, and that too in a very lonely or a area which is not inhabit, where there is likelihood of a lot of fear because of the fear of ghosts. So to overcome that fear becomes a spiritual challenge. That fear is one of the obstructions which obstruct our journey towards the goal supreme. So tantras, they have this peculiar or very strange ways of overcoming fear. So gradually they start with all these things, and that is in that context we have to understand that it is not some tribal or some aboriginal method of meditation, but highly evolved tantric souls, tantric sadhakas, they resort to such apparently very difficult practices to get rid of the fear, which, because the fear of death, the fear of ghosts, these are the some of the fears which are very difficult to difficult to discard. So this is one sadhana which perhaps helps them to face fear. When you face certain difficulties, troubles, as Swami Vivekananda said, they have a tendency to vanish. So when you face something, when you run away from something, the particular trouble or the particular anxiety chases you. But when you face that particular emotion or face that particular situation, then you can conquer it. That lesson Swami Vivekananda learned when he was walking near the Durga temple in Banaras. When one sadhu told him, "Don't run away from those," the ferocious monkeys were chasing him. So when the monkeys were chasing him, he was trying to run away, and all of a sudden he heard a sound. Samna karo means face the monkeys, don't run away like that. And when he turned his back and just faced the monkeys face to face, Even those ferocious monkey, for a time they were not expecting. For a moment they just stopped and then slowly withdrew. He had done nothing, he had not even attacked them, he just faced them. And Swami Vivekananda in Los Angeles, when he was giving one talk, he mentioned this incident and said, when difficulties, trials, and tribulations, when we have to face these things, it is always good to face them face to face. It's not good to run away from them. The more we run away, the more they chase us. So here, this idea is being, I mean, is followed in some of the tantric practices where they sit in the deep forest on a corpse and do their sadhana. So he was worshipping this particular. Now Sri Ramakrishna is telling this story or this incident where he was worshipping the Divine Mother. Naturally, tantrics worship the Divine Mother, and he began to have frightful visions. Now, as a result of even Buddha, when he sat, he had so many uh, terrible visions, and he just sat calmly till he got nirvana. So it's very common that when one does spiritual practices very sincerely, then there might be, it's not mandatory or necessary that everybody will have such experiences, but he might have very frightful visions. If he's trying to force his will and do sadhana, then some of the old samskaras may result in such frightful visions. Then finally, a tiger carried him away. There was another man. Now, this really happened. So, naturally, if you are doing sadhana in the deep forest where there is a corpse lying, the danger of wild animals is also there. So, unfortunately, this poor sadhaka was carried away by a tiger. But there was another man who had climbed up a nearby tree in fear of that tiger. Seeing the dead body and arrangements for worship, he came down, took some holy water. Now he saw that this poor sadhaka, both were sadhakas, but one was unfortunately carried away by the tiger, so he could not complete his sadhana and he mm, died before he could finish his sadhana. But the other person, he had seen that this previous sadhaka had made all arrangements and was sitting on the corpse, and he had also come with that intention. So he knew that okay, maybe it is mother's wish. So he gets down slowly after the tiger takes away the other sadhaka. And when he sits on his and does a little japa, he comes, Sri Ramakrishna says, seeing the dead body and the arrangements for worship, he comes down. He came down, took some holy water and sat on the corpse. He had performed only a little japa when the Divine Mother appeared before him and said, I am pleased with you. Ask for a boon. Bowing low at the lotus feet of the mother, he said, this new sadhaka said, may I just ask you one thing? He was a bit curious. He said, I am amazed at your action. After all, that man made so many arrangements for worship and practiced spiritual disciplines in this jungle, in this forest for so many days on that corpse. So laboriously did the sadhana, but you still did not bless him, and he was carried away by the tiger. But I, who know nothing, I am not a good sadhaka like him, neither have I made any preparations. I never repeat your name or practice such spiritual disciplines. But I have neither I have love or devotion for you. I just came out of curiosity. Yet I received your grace. How is that? Why was that person deprived, though he did so much? And why you have showered your grace upon me? The Divine Mother then answered him and laughed. Sri Ramakrishna says, and said, child, you don't remember your past lives. Sri Krishna told Arjuna that you don't know what you were. I know all your past lives. That is the difference between an incarnation and an ordinary jiva, an ordinary sadhaka. The Ishwar Koti or the incarnation, they have the capacity to know the past, present, and future. You practiced austerities for me for so many births. It is because of the strength of those austerities that all these things were arranged for you. It is also for that reason that you were blessed with my vision. Now tell me, what boon do you want? So, Sri Krishna is now trying to explain the discrepancies which we normally see when we see some people making progress, some of the disciples, and some not making uh, fast progress or quick progress. So, what is the reason? The Sri Krishna is trying to explain here in the gospel by giving this example that you have to take into account the previous birth also. So, the previous birth also makes a huge difference because of the sadhana done in the previous birth. Nothing is lost, as Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that no effort will be lost. No matter what happens in this birth, you may not reach the culmination of your sadhana in this birth. But that doesn't mean that whatever you have done, when Arjuna asks Sri Krishna that what will happen if I die midway or if my body goes away and I'm not able to complete this sadhana, will all my efforts go waste? And Arjuna is told by Sri Krishna that how can it go waste? You will be either born in a spiritual family or in a rich family with spiritual inclinations. So, yoga brashta means one who, before reaching the state of the highest yoga, one who dies or one who is killed is known as a yoga brashta, or maybe one who has stopped his spiritual practice for some reason. It has got terminated. That person will be born, that his efforts will never be waste. So now listening to all these things, which Sri Krishna is trying to explain, some of the devotees are still not able to understand. It's very natural when Sri Krishna speaks so casually, or maybe so uh, people are really frightened to hear of this kind of suicide. So devotee says, I feel terribly frightened to hear of this suicide. Then Sri Krishna confirms, yes, yes, definitely. Sri Krishna says, suicide is a great sin. A person who commits suicide will have to return and suffer and again suffer the world's trials and tribulations. So he tells us, Sri Krishna is telling us the consequence of a person who has committed suicide by a person who has not realized the highest truth. If he has done it to avoid certain trials and tribulations because he could not bear with all those things, then that person cannot escape because he has to be born again and again till he works out his karma. The karma theory says that you have to work out your karma. You just can't cut short thinking that suicide will put an end to my karma. That's not going to happen because according to the law of karma, till he finishes his, that is why Swami Vivekananda very often used to say that a great sacrifice is going on. The Divine Mother, she is not that she amused to make some people suffer or make some people very joyful. It's not that, it's our own karma. So he says if you willingly participate in the great sacrifice, then Mother relieves you from a lot of pain, trials and tribulations. That means if you surrender your ego, the ego is one of the main distractions in our spiritual life. It makes us commit karma again and again, especially negative karma, and then it binds us more and more. So, but if we uh, try to surrender our ego to the Divine Mother or to the cosmic will, if we surrender our will, then our ego gets merged, and then we can escape a lot of trouble. Swamiji says a lot of people can escape if we are willing, uh, we willingly take part in this great cosmic sacrifice. There may be unpleasant events, unpleasant incidents in our life. That is because of our karma. But if we willingly, if we try to oppose it and try to defy the law. That doesn't mean we have to suffer. We have to struggle very hard to overcome that trial and tribulation. And if we do that, uh, we may exhaust a lot of our karma. But suicide is definitely not a way. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says suicide is a great sin. Anybody who thinks that after committing suicide he'll be free from all the trials and tribulations, that's not going to happen. He has to come back again in some other form, in some other human body, and maybe it will take more time because uh, that is why our Shastras discourage suicide. But Sri Ramakrishna, there is a but here. But if a person ends his life after having the vision of God, now this vision of God is not just an hallucination. There is again confusion here. Anybody who has some hallucination, the other day when we were discussing about Raj Yoga, I don't know how many of you, we had a great discussion on the different experiences, the validity of different experiences in the different, especially in the yoga tradition, because yoga is the practical aspect of Vedanta. So, uh, the authenticity, when somebody gets a vision, how authentic it is, that will, there are certain conditions which Patanjali discusses. So I'm not going into the details. You can see it in my previous class, which has now been uploaded on YouTube. So that was the Friday class. So there Patanjali says what is a true vision or what is a true experience. Spiritual experiences, all spiritual experiences may not be true. They have certain conditions. If certain conditions are fulfilled, then you can validate that spiritual experience. So when Swamiji, when Sri Ramakrishna says that if a person ends his life after having a vision of God, he is talking of a genuine, authentic spiritual experience as he had. Then he says there is no harm in giving up the body that way. Even such a gruesome incident or gruesome suicide, Sri Ramakrishna seems to be justifying, but let us remember this is a very, very, very rare case. It rarely happens this way. They also say some great people like Ram Tirtha and all, willingly or unwillingly, when they were drowning, they were just chanting Om and trying to merge their mind in the infinite spirit. So there may be exceptional cases where some sadhakas there may not be any harm in committing, giving up the body that way. Then it is not known as a suicide. It's not out of disgust. It's something which they feel, which Swamiji himself once felt, that what's the use? Sri Ramakrishna himself um, uh, demonstrated in his own life. Swamiji said he many times used to feel that I don't want to do any work. It is because of a little Maya which was forced upon him by Thakur, by Sri Ramakrishna, that he had to work, do all this. Otherwise, he was very happy to go back to the state from which he came. So, many people after attaining knowledge, if they have not already attained it, if they were not Nitya Muktas by birth, some people might attain the knowledge at a very young age, and then they would perhaps think that this body really, I don't need to keep this body because it has served its purpose. So Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example. He says after a gold image has been cast in a clay mold, the mold may be preserved, or if it is cracked it can be thrown away. So there he is giving a very beautiful, a nice hint here. He says after you make a gold image in a clay molds are normally used, and a gold image has been cast in that mold. So after that, if the mold is cracked, then you naturally have to throw it away because it will not serve its purpose. You cannot cast another gold image in that. But if it is not cracked, then it can be preserved. What is the idea behind this example which Sri Ramakrishna is giving? The idea is that if some people has some purpose to serve, then they retain the body. They retain the ego of knowledge or ego of bhakti, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. They don't have any ego. It has been merged with the universal ego. But they do as they have been told by the cosmic will makes them act, and but that is if their mold is not cracked. Crack if the mold is cracked means there is some defect, and the purpose, the cosmic will or the cosmic purpose cannot serve in that particular mold, then it may be destroyed also. So that is why uh, Sri Ramakrishna told Swamiji, we had a very sick body. So he said once its job is done, I mean, that's why he died at a very, many people ask this question, why Swamiji passed away. He was a great yogi. We can't compare Swami Vivekananda by two ordinary yogis who have done sadhana or very, very rudimentary type of yoga, those who have practiced, who just practice yoga to have a long life. They are the most, you may say, novices compared to the yoga which Swami Vivekananda practiced. So those yogis, they consider longevity as a sign of uh, practicing yoga. That may be true at the lower stages till the asana, pranayama and all that will help you to keep the gross body fit. But even that has a limit. After a certain age, the body has to be cast away. Whereas when Swamiji says this, when he practiced his sadhana, he was not attached to the body right from his birth. He was happy to be immersed in that infinite consciousness which was his real home. That's why he sang that song, Mana Chalo Nija Niketane. So when he came and when he was forced to do that, naturally when its job was over and his body was no longer, that's why he very often said, this body which was born in the soil of Bengal is not a very strong body. He sometimes jokingly told Gangadhar Maharaj once. In fact, he gave a vision after his death that if I had been born in some northern area like Punjab or somewhere where I would have been born with a naturally strong body, not that it affects the spirituality in any way, but what he meant was if the instrument has to last longer, it has to have a particular type of body. So that is why even Sri Ramakrishna after sadhana, he said, my body is not going to last long. They had their own they the own purpose. So the body was fit to last for 39 years and a few months in the case of Swamiji. So that's why Thakur is hinting here. Once the gold image has been cast, the mold may be preserved. It doesn't really matter. If it is cracked, it can be thrown away. But if it is good, the mold may be preserved. So he is giving another example now. Many years ago, a boy named Gopal Sen used to come here from Baranagar. He was about 20 years old. He would experience such deep emotions that Hridaya had to hold him. So he was one spiritually evolved soul according to Sri Ramakrishna. One day the boy suddenly touched my feet. He had recognized the divinity in Sri Ramakrishna and he said, Sir, I won't be able to come here anymore. So I take your leave. So he had understood the purpose for which he was born was fulfilled. Maybe he had some vision, he had some very, very strong spiritual intuition that this was his last birth and he had got the blessings of Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna just kept quiet. A few days later, I heard that he had given up his body. So in these two cases, as in the case of Vishnu, who had come to meet him when he was very young, maybe he died when he was a bit older. He had left his hometown and gone towards the west and was meditating in the forest northwest or west of Bengal. Whereas this boy, I think he gave up his body within a few days after meeting Sri Ramakrishna and touching his feet and telling him that I will not come here anymore. So that means he had a premonition of death. So these are certain incidents in the gospel which we have to understand and read carefully. Now, the next topic, I hope I shall take a little more time because we started late. Mm. So I hope it is okay. Ranjit?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah, I can take a little more because we started late,
Push
na?
Maharaj.
Yes,
Yeah.
Maharaj. No
Okay,
problem.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Don't worry. Take your
So
Maharaj.
after this topic, because this is a very, very strange kind of topic, you'll never come across these thoughts in the gospel. It has been discussed because suicide is something which is never encouraged in any of the scriptures. But the explanation which Sri Ramakrishna gives clarifies many things. Now we come to the next chapter, which is the essence of Gita, according to Mahatma Gandhi also. Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasva mam. So having come to this impermanent and unhappy world, you worship me. Now this topic, this chapter 2, the conversation is still going on. Vijay Krishna Goswami, they are all there. And there's a nice crowd here, all seekers who have come here and assembled here. So M has now quoted the 9th chapter, the 33rd verse of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and the Sri Krishna is now mentioning about the four kinds of men. Men in the sense four kinds of jivas, which we discussed just now. The Nitya concept of Nitya Mukta, the ever free. So there are four classes of human beings. First is bound souls, Baddha Jiva, seekers after liberation, and Bengali it is known as Mumukshu, the liberated, Mukta, and ever free, the Nitya Mukta. So these are the four broad categories which describe the state of evolution of a sadhaka. You can't call the Nitya Mukta a sadhaka because his sadhana is just a leela. Most of the Nitya Muktas, they don't need any sadhana, but because they have to play a particular role in as a Leela Sahachar or as a companion of the Avatara makes them perform sadhana. In fact, the Avatara himself has to be a role model to all the sadhaka. So he himself, though he doesn't need any sadhana, he has to do sadhana. So apart from the Nitya Mukta, the other three categories, that is Baddha Jiva, those who are totally bound and they don't care to be released from bondage. Then seekers after liberation, the Mumukshus, who know that there is some the impermanent in this world. So anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasva mam. Why these two words anityam and asukham are tagged together? The word sukha is the opposite of dukkha. But Sri Krishna could have used the words not just for rhyming or for matching the meter, he has used this. He could have said dukkham here also. But he says asukham. There is a reason for that. Because when you are using the word anityam, nityam means that which is permanent, that which is eternal. Anityam means that which is temporary, transient, though it may be joyful. You have to remember that. But why is anityam asukham? Why is it not joyful? Because it is not joyful eternally. If something gives us happiness without any break, unalloyed bliss, as they use, the word used is for Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda. The Ananda aspect is known as unalloyed bliss. You don't use the word joy for that. You don't use the word happiness for that, Sukha for that. In Sanskrit, Sukha means it always uh, 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 meant in the sense of temporary joy. So, anityam, it is asukham. It is not a joy, but it is because it is anitya, it is asukha. It cannot give a permanent joy. Anything temporary, we can only give you temporary joy. So Sri Krishna in this chapter 9 chapter very clearly says, if you have got somehow come to this world as the boy Vishnu and the other one Gopal Sen felt when they were very young. They were lucky because they understood the essence of this verse, Anityam Asukam Lokam. very clearly without having been told by anybody. They knew this, they had a distaste for the world. So this Anasakti, which is the core message of the Bhagavad Gita, you do whatever you like, but without Anasakti, all our sadhana comes to is big zero. It is like uh, putting two stones. Swami Bhuteshanji Maharaj used to give a beautiful example. What is Abhyasa and Vairagya? So he used to say that if a one stone is placed on another stone, a huge stone, if you want to remove the lower stone, you have to remove the upper stone first, then you can easily remove it. So if you want to do sadhana, then you have to unburden yourself, and attachment to the world, which is in Sri Ramakrishna's case, he is very unequivocal. He says attachment to lust and greed. He, in his rustic language, used to say kamini kanchan tyag. So to make it very obvious to people who would not understand philosophical terms, if you say anitya ke chhede dao or leave the anitya, the people will not understand what is temporary, what is permanent. Anything that is gross is impermanent. So to leave the gross, but more effective way of telling the same thing is to give up lust and greed, because greed is for gross things. Lust is also for lust is not a higher desire. A desire for mukti is not considered to be a lust. Lust is always for the gross things. So lust and greed, kamini kanchan, has to be given up. It is a sign of the worldly, and they are known as the baddha souls. So that's why he says there are four classes of human beings: bound souls, seekers after liberation, the liberated, and the ever free. And then he gives a beautiful example of a fishing net. See, these beautiful parables, they are such powerful methods. No amount of philosophy or no amount of intellectual uh, intellectual effort trying to understand the Shastras will create an impact, especially when ordinary people take to spiritual life. These examples, these word pictures which are created by Thakur's parables, they that picture you can just imagine a fish. Everybody sees fishing being done. In Bengal, at least, it was very common. Every uh, person would either have a pukur or a pond, and uh, either they would go to the sea or maybe freshwater fish. So fishing was seen by children from for people of every ages. So it can be a wonderful, powerful example to show, to explain what are these four kinds of jivas. So he says the world is like a fishing net. Individual souls are like the fish, and God, whose Maya is the world, is the fisherman. So God is in control of the net. So it is like Prakruti is the net which binds a person, but at the same time, Prakruti does not bind everybody. Prakruti, through her avidya maya, binds. Through her vidya maya, she also opens the way to, out of the net to escape. So it is God's wish, I mean the Ishvara or the Brahman, who through his Maya, which is the world, and the fisherman is compared to God. It's just a example Swami Sri Ramakrishna is giving to explain how the jivas, the four category of jivas, are living in this world. When the fish fall into the net, many of them try to tear it to free themselves. They are like those who are seeking liberation. So some fish who are very rajasic, who are almost sattvic, they don't want any kind of bondage. You see here, sattva, rajas, and tamas can be considered as the three gunas which form the net of Maya. Now we'll see how sattvic and rajasic. Who are the mumukshus? Mumukshus are who jivas who have a lot of sattva, but at the same time have a lot of rajas, because they are bound and they want to tear apart the net and go out. So they have to make a lot of effort. So they are the mumukshus. However, not all who try to escape are able to do. Now certain things like tamas are holding them down. Perhaps they don't have enough strength to bite or to escape, or they don't have enough energy to keep on trying to escape from the net. So all mumukshus will not survive. Only a few fish slip out with a splash. Then people cry out, there goes a big one. So some big ones who are really great sadhakas, they somehow manage not to get caught because they constantly make effort and escape the net of Maya. Those few are the liberated ones, and the fisherman definitely would not like most of his fish to escape. So he'll take all precautions. So only it's very logical that only a few fish escape. So they are the lucky ones, the mumukshus who are seeking liberation. But they have to make efforts. They can't simply say that we will just lie there and the fisherman, out of his bounty, out of his grace, he will just release us after catching us. That is not going to happen. The fisherman is there to catch. Prakriti is there to catch us. And if we want, we have to escape. No doubt Prakriti will show us the way. The Purusha or the Brahman, the Supreme Ishvara, who controls Prakriti, will allow us to escape the Maya if we really want it. But then effort is required. Self effort is required. We have to tear the net or somehow manage to escape the net. But for that, a deep yearning to be free. However, all those who try, this is very important, that all do not get mukti even if they try their 100%. Maybe in stages they will develop, and in the next birth they will perhaps escape the net. Then people cry out, there goes the big one. That means people are appreciating the liberated ones who are trying a bit harder than the normal jivas to escape the bondage of Maya. Then some fish are so cautious by nature that they never fall into the net. So right from childhood, you see there are some people who cannot be forced to enter the net, leave alone. They don't want to get caught and then try to escape. So they want never fall into the net of Maya. So Narada and other such saints are ever free. They are the Nitya Muktas. They never fall into the net of the world. So some fish we will find either they are very deep, in the sense they are so highly evolved, they don't want any kind of fun to just come to the surface and then get caught. They said we have seen enough of this divine play or the Prakriti's Maya, that we don't want to fall into the net of the world. So they are very cautious. So some fish who are very cautious, they somehow manage to uh, escape this. Then but most fish are unaware that they have fallen into the net and they will die. These are the tamasic people, the Nitya Baddha, who are very happy, they make merry, they think the world is all in all. They don't even consider, they even if they are told this world is anitya, they will rebel. He said, you just don't bother me like that. I am having a nice time here. No doubt it is a small, like the Charvakas. They said, even if I have to borrow a ghee and then eat nice stuff, I don't have to bother about repaying the loan. Even if you have to take a loan, I will take, but I will enjoy this life. So they are like these fish who just deny out of, because of their strong egos. They're so uh, so much engrossed in the small little funs and joys of the world, temporary joys, that they feel that the bigger net is not clear to their vision. They don't even bother if there is a big net. They said now we are here, and they are unaware that they have fallen into the net and they will die there. They dart straight ahead and taking the net along with them and try to hide in the mud. That means some fish, especially the shallow pond fish, there is a lot of mud below. The net is below. So they think the moment they encounter the net, they will go deep into the mud. So they'll seek false security in the worldly things. They'll think that if I have money, if I have this, if I have that, they go on going deeper and deeper into the mud, trying to feel a false sense of security. And the fisherman allows them. You lie in the mud for some time, don't worry. After some time I am going to drag you and then you have to leave that mud. So they ignore the net and take the net along with them instead of escaping. When there is a chance they don't escape and try to hide in the mud. They say, oh, we are very safe, now the net will, but when the net is pulled, they dig deeper into the mud. They are like the bound souls. They live in the net thinking we are free. We are quite happy here. Not free, we are quite happy here. So the mud is there. We are very happy. We are still in the pond. But it will not be long before they are pulled. Bound souls remain attached to the world, and that is to lust and greed. So Sri Ramakrishna gives such a beautiful example. They remain sunk in the sordid sea and think they are very happy. However, those who seek liberation and those who are liberated look upon the world as a deep well. Now, this is another example Sri Ramakrishna is giving. They don't like it. Some of them who attain knowledge, the vision of God, give up their bodies. But this is very important. Giving up the body in this way is very rare. So, bound creatures, the worldly, do not wake up. They suffer so much misery, so much trial, so much sorrows. Even then, they do not awaken. They are happy with the mud which they are lying. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives a last example. I'll just discuss this, then we'll continue next in the next uh, class. He says a camel likes thorny bushes. Most of these sketches have been drawn. There's some very nice books where these sketches have been drawn, and they are enough to convey a lot of ideas if you have read the gospel. A camel likes thorny bushes. The more it eats, the more its mouth bleeds. Yet it keeps on eating the same thorny bush. It does not stop. The worldly suffer so much agony, so much sorrow, yet they revert back to their old self quite soon. If a man's wife has died or she has proved unfaithful to him, he marries again. Perhaps he has lost a son and suffered much sorrow, but he forgets all this in a few days. The mother of the boy, beside herself with grief, ties up her hair again and bedecks herself with jewelry. In the same way, though people spend all they have on the marriage of their daughters, they continue giving birth to more children year after year. They lose everything in litigation, yet they go again to court. They can't feed the children they have, neither can they educate them, nor can they look after them properly. Still, they have more children every year. So these are the some of the examples which we see in nature, which Sri Ramakrishna is giving to convey a very important point of how easy it is to for a person, for a jiva, to become a Baddha jiva, then become a mumukshu. Because to become a mumukshu jiva, one has to struggle, like the fish who wants to come out of the net. But if that desire is not there, then what chances are there? It is natural that a day will come or a time will come when the net will be pulled up and he will be destroyed. So I will take your leave now. I've taken a lot of time. You are also late. So I don't think there's time for questions. We'll leave the questions for some next time. Okay, Ranjit?